all of the code requirements, all of the technology, all of the educational requirements. The local share of that is about $55 to $60 million, I think we were saying. So that's an important analysis to consider when you're looking at that 47 for what we've been calling the half loaf versus 55 to 60 for the full loaf.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
In addition to that, the work that would have to take place cannot be done over summers, and it can't be done over Christmas vacation. So then there would be an impact where we'd have to move people. The way the sequencing of this project is working, and the MSBA does not reimburse for temporary space. So we're very lucky that we're rotating. So if we had to do all the HVAC over, rip down the ceilings, the school would have to either get more mobile trailers or vacate to somewhere else. So there would be an impact to students.
And I just want to remind everybody, too, that we have 18 modular classrooms at the two buildings. Those aren't going to last forever, so those have to be replaced as well. Who's next? Mr. Jones.
First off, I've been lobbied at least 3 times tonight on the legacy issue, and I appreciate that at my age.
Mr. Jones, by the way, was on the building committee that built the middle school, which has lasted in the test of time, and the school that we're now getting ready to remodel. So I just want to give you that information.
I have 3 questions, and I'm not sure they can all be answered tonight, but let me ask the first one. If this project proceeds as presented, what is the anticipated impact on the operating budget? I'm not sure you can answer that tonight, so if you can't, I respect that, but I think that is a question that should be answered before we have to vote on something. Secondly, having been acquainted with a number of projects in town, I have a couple of project cost questions. The first one is what I know as FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And I want to be sure that all this is included within this project, which hasn't always happened in other projects, and all of a sudden, when the project's done, we've had to absorb things. And it can be anything miscellaneous from a flagpole to gym mats to office equipment to science labs or whatever. Secondly, in that same cost factor, you're going to move the high school to the new high school, and then you're going to move the middle school to the old high school, and then you're going to move the middle school back to the renovated high school. Those are all moving costs, and I'm not sure if they're factored in the overall project. If you'd like, I'll give you my third and last question.
I don't know if I can remember the first 2 now, Brad. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. We'll get back to the first 3.
I'm not sure about the middle school, but there are a number of pieces of the high school named after people. You're now in the Shea Auditorium. There's the Kitness Gym. There's the O'Donoghue Library. There's the Butler Courtyard. I'm not sure if there are any plans, or if there are, in forwarding those names and honoring them in some way, if not in space, at least in some other manner. Thank you.
As to the second question regarding what costs are included in the project, I'm going to ask Chris Simler, our project manager, to address that. Do that first. Chris?
Okay, I can also maybe address the first one. The MSBA does require an analysis be done by the mechanical, electrical, and all the engineers to provide a cost analysis, and then there's a comparison done to the current operating cost versus future, and it goes out for so many years. So that analysis is done once the system is more designed. As far as the other costs, all good points. The MSBA, FF&E, which is the movable furniture type stuff, flags, trash cans, desk, chairs, everything. And also the technology, they allow $2,400 per student. So if you take 2,400 times the 1,370, we have a budget of $3.2 million in that number that would be reimbursed. And as far as the moving, yes, we have a budget for a move management consultant. We've done this on other projects, and we want the expert to come in, coordinate the packing and the moving and the swing space over the summer, the moving over the summer, so things happen, so the school isn't impacted on the first day of school, and we take advantage of that summer. So all those costs are accounted for.
And Jerry
Mr. Jones, as to the first question, I'll ask the superintendent. We have had some discussions about the legacies and preserving the names that were placed on a lot of the high school gymnasium and things like that. So, Kathy?
Sure. Mr. Jones, recently Mr. Bernard and I have had a conversation about what are the spaces in this facility that have been named after individuals, and I was provided with a very nice tour. I now know what those spaces are, and we do plan to translate those named spaces to the new facility. Again, it will be a conversation with the school committee, but that will be my recommendation.
Yes, who's next? Yes, sir.
Question on the combined facilities, combined floor, so middle school and high school, sharing gym, cafeteria, and some other spaces. How do we separate the students, specifically lunchtime and some other common times of the day?
I'm going to again turn this over to Kathy Willis, our superintendent. She spent, I think, approximately 30 years in the Triton School District, and I think she can answer this question based on experience.
Thank you. It's an excellent question. I worked for the Triton Regional School District for 30 years, and 12 of my last years there I lived in the middle school, high school complex. It was a combined facility with separate entrances in the same way that this project is being designed, and I can tell you that the middle school principal and the high school principal worked very closely together, easy to do when you're on the same campus, and the use of the shared core facilities was managed through the schedules of the middle school and the high school. The middle school philosophy is different from a high school philosophy, and they function on different schedules. And it's important for that middle school principal and high school principal to work together. I believe earlier tonight Brad was able to show you that the cafeteria has separate spaces for our students in the middle school and the high school. They will share one kitchen, but they will actually be seated in separate facilities, so they will not be combined during the lunch periods. We were also shown that there's an opportunity for the gym to be divided, and so based on schedules, there will be middle school students on one side of that gym, divided by a divider, so that they're not interacting with high school students who would be on the other side of that gym, all governed by schedules. In terms of the use of the Library Media Center, as we moved through the design phase, we were taking a look at how can we ensure that there would be an opportunity for students to access the materials that they need, the technology that they need, but also to maintain some separateness while in that Library Media Center. We've had meetings with the librarians from both the middle school and the high school. We've sat down with the design team of the architects, and we've talked about how can we create a space that's welcoming, but also recognizes the different developmental needs of those two populations. And so we have created structures within that venue to ensure that students will access what they need, but be in separate parts of that very large facility. I think Brad showed you how significantly that Library Media Center will grow in order to accommodate the population. I'd just like to also add that if anybody's wondering about busing students to this combined middle school, high school facility, I want to assure you that we will maintain separate bus schedules so that the high school will continue at its own schedule and arrive on a set of buses to deliver them to the campus. And then the buses will go out again and pick up our middle school students who will come in a different entrance and begin their day at the same time that they're beginning their day now. So we are maintaining separate programs along with a separate 6th grade academy on that second floor that Brad Dortz spoke to you about to ensure a smooth transition from the elementary schools to the middle school. Did I cover all of the questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, up in the back.
I think my question is for Representative Jones. Since the MSBA has been funding these school projects, can you give a sense of towns that went through the whole project submission, got approved, put it to a town vote, and then actually said no? And of those towns, can you point to examples where they had to pay more money down the road? For example, I know that we're in about $10 million worth of code violations if this doesn't go through, where the educational program suffered or where the town's reputation was impacted.
I want to say, towns that have said no. I mean, North Reading obviously said no when we were looking at an elementary school project. When we were looking at Swan Pond, we went through a number of different iterations. ultimately to keep coming back to a list. It's a little challenging, and I could do some research and get an answer for you, because there's two, I look at it as two very different school building projects, and I've worked on school building authorities. There was the first one that kind of covered everything up through the batch in town, and then everything kind of happened after that. And it's really night and day. I mean, if we were working under the old model, we'd be going forward, we'd be told we approved, we'd get on the list. Maybe sometime after, quite frankly, children that aren't born yet have graduated here, the town might get a reimbursement under the old system. Under the new system, we would get a check on an ongoing basis. You know, I'd have to look and see what towns have said no, but obviously other towns have jumped in the fray, and then maybe a town that said no has had to come back in and look at some of the cost changes. But there have been some towns that have said no along the way. I think it's a much better program, so I think a lot of towns are faced with the idea that saying no is not really an attractive alternative, because there is such a dynamic process. In MSBA, it's far more involved in a collaborative process to look at future enrollment alternatives to guide the process, and I think a much stronger commitment from the state about when money is going to be turned over to a town. The number of communities saying no is far less than it might otherwise be. In part because, you know, MSB comes in and says, this is how many projects we can afford, and if you say no, you're going to go to the end. So I think there's a much higher success rate now in the new MSB, but we can certainly look and get back to you on that if you want to talk to me so offline. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, in response to that question, by the way, within the last week or 10 days, Concord Carlisle voted for a new high school overwhelmingly. I think it was like a 75-25 vote in favor of the project, which I think was about a $97 million project. I think Marshfield just voted to approve a project, and on December 6th, Wilmington, our neighbor, is voting on a new high school project. So they're a little bit ahead of us in this process. It'll be interesting to see how that vote comes out. Yes, sir, go back.
I just wanted to kind of just critique the design a little bit. How many new classrooms are being created with this current design? The reason for that is, I mean, I see the gymnasium, and I'm all for physical education, but I see that as kind of overkill, having multiple basketball courts. I mean, if there's not that many new classrooms being created, shouldn't we eliminate one of those and actually add more classrooms, potentially add new courses that might not be available to the students today?
If the basketball people are in here, you better run for cover. This is the anti-basketball guy. I'm going to ask Brad Jewett to address the question about classrooms. And again, the phys ed space, you've got to understand that phys ed space is broken down into teaching stations to accommodate the 1,300 plus students. But I'm going to ask Brad again to address that.
Type here is so small, and I'm getting older, so it's harder to read. But we certainly have improved in terms of the overall number of classrooms and the overall total aggregate square footage of space that's dedicated to academic classrooms. And that's also in terms of absolute numbers and then the actual size of those classrooms. An example of this, you know, you can look at how the middle school is being proposed to be renovated, whereas that gymnasium space right now is being reconstituted into science labs and general classrooms, where formerly it was actually, you know, as you know, a gymnasium space. In terms of, you know, are we sacrificing academics for athletic space? There certainly has been a healthy debate about that, but I think overall, when we look at just pure, put it in terms of basketball courts, the basketball court size is slightly larger, not tremendously larger, but slightly larger in terms of maybe 100 square feet. But when you look at the overall gymnasium space, it's increased significantly, and that was a part of the negotiation process with the state. In terms of, just give you, again, a barometer in terms of square footage, that looks like about 23,000 square feet of kind of typical general classrooms that currently exist, and we're going to about 44,000 square feet of typical general classrooms as being proposed in the new facility.
I mean, one question, I mean, are the classrooms just bigger, or are there going to be more of them?
they're going to be bigger and there are going to be more of them. John, I think you wanted to respond.
I did. I just wanted to add to the answer to that if I could. You know, one of the keys too is that the design of the classrooms